Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Today we're talking about the results produced by Warhammer.com when they've looked at some RTT win rates for Warhammer the Old World. Now some of you may or may not have seen this chart floating around, and it does come with a massive grain of salt. There's not been many RTTs, we're looking at a new game, and the factions just haven't been played enough to get a load of meaningful data. But we are starting to see some data floating out, so it's worth a look just to see what it may or may not be telling us. Now looking at this table, you can see against each of the factions a number in brackets next to the name. That is the number of games played. So Skaven and Demons of Chaos, for example, have only played 3 games, suggesting they were probably taken once in an RTT. That's 1 player across 7 events for this particular data stream. So I think for those particular factions, it is incredibly difficult, as Warhammer themselves acknowledge, to draw any conclusions about how successful they've been. You could be up against just some hard counters for that one person maybe brand new, we don't know anything about that kind of stuff, so yeah, really difficult to tell. Even those factions that have played a substantially increased number of games to that number of 3, such as Bretonnia, Orcs and Goblins, and Khemri, we're only talking between 20 and 27 matchups. So again, we're looking at a really small data pool. Having said that, I do think the data that's being shown is quite interesting. So I think if you follow internet wisdom, there was real concerns about the Chaos Lord mounted on a dragon and how that was one of the more powerful units on the game and going to be utterly devastating in the expected meta. Of 18 games played, we're only seeing a 36% win rate, with, if there was a 19th game, a 3% being added to that. So not a huge win rate for a faction that has some really powerful stuff available to it. I've faced down Warriors of Chaos as well, a big block of Nurgle Chaos Warriors, and actually with suitable support they can be very tough to deal with while also dishing out quite a lot of hurt. So obviously don't know the background factors as mentioned, but surprised to see Warriors of Chaos down there. I was also surprised to see Orcs and Goblins and Bretonnia, 2 of the factions that have seen the most, in fact the 2 factions that have seen the most play, have such low win rates at 33% for Bretonnia and 29% for the Orcs and Goblins. Bretonnia feel very strong with their powerful units of knights, units which also can be deployed to take up quite a small amount of space on the board with their lance formation, backed by the men-at-arms blob that just goes nowhere in a hurry. Orcs and Goblins, decent skirmishers, access to blokes on wyverns. Now it might be that of course that the people playing at these events haven't got access to all the models they'd like to fully flesh out the strengths of those factions, but interesting to see them so far near the bottom, considering the amount of power they seem to have, and that the internet does seem to think Orcs and Goblins are going to be a powerful choice in the meta. So case of watch this space as more information comes to light. But yeah, I think definitely not what I was expecting from the initial set of results. At the minute, the leader of the pack with a 70% win rate from 20 games, Tomb Kings of Khemri. Now, they also have access to a very powerful dragon, so I don't know if that's what's causing this to happen. They've also obviously got some hard-hitting chariots floating around as well. I've not played against Tomb Kings yet, so I've not really seen them in action. Yeah, interesting to see them up there. They've not a faction that's really been up there in the last days of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. So it could just be some good players giving them some love. It could be, of course, that they're one of the factions that have got models that are released, but the same is true, of course, of Bretonnia as well, who are right down at the other end of the match table. Now, personally, I'm not sure exactly how many games the various factions need to see play for the data set to start to become reliable. We're probably looking at 100+ games, I'd guess, for each of them. So I'd suggest that the only data we can draw from this is those with over 20 games played. And even then, as I say, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt because there's just so little data available, and we're also looking at a game that's establishing itself. People are still coming to terms with what's good, what's not good, etc. So there's so many different background factors included in all of this that I think it's impossible to say who exactly is the best. That being said, based on what we do know, which is this data, it does look like Tomb Kings and potentially the Beastmen are up there. Wood Elves with a 64% win rate after 14 games, looking good, and they are a faction which has been labelled as strong given their mobility and plenty of shooting which can bypass the armour of an awful lot of stuff. Personally, I will definitely take an interest in more of this data as it starts to emerge, so we can sort of see which factions are doing well, which factions are starting to struggle as there's more tournaments going on around the world. If you've liked this video and looking forward to other ones like it, do consider subscribing to the channel. I will try and keep abreast of this data as I become aware of it. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.